Which way do you think the Premier is going to go today?
Well, look, what I need to see is the borders open, or the Premier needs to make a decision, Pete. This has been one of the most difficult things for Queenslanders to deal with, is the fact that the Premier doesn't seem to grasp the economic impact of her dithering is making. You know, we've got about 200,000 people out of jobs in Queensland. We are a tourism state. It is important that our borders get open again. We do rely on those southern tourists flowing into the state, particularly in these beautiful winter months of ours. So let's hope the Premier makes the right decision for Queenslanders and opens the borders today.
Does Victoria's outbreak, though, give you pause?
Well, look, like the Prime Minister said, there is no medical advice. There is no reason why the borders should be closed. So that's why I'm on a unity ticket here with the Prime Minister. We've heard from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer that there is no medical advice for the borders to be closed. It is safe. We do have to learn to live with this virus. And we've heard that from many commentators and many experts. Queensland is a safe state. Now, of course, if people are coming from any of the hotspots, they're going to have to quarantine and they're going to have to pay for their own quarantining. So, you know, we would be doing everything we can to discourage the people from hotspots in Victoria to come into Queensland. But quite frankly, when you're looking at, you know, 1,000 jobs a week that is being lost, $200 million worth of economic activity being lost every week in this state. I mean, we need to get clear, concise messaging, and that's what the Premier hasn't been giving us.
So is that your position, Deb, that anyone who flies in from Victoria would have to quarantine for 14 days before they would be allowed out, and then they would have to pay for that expense as well?
Well, look, if they're coming from a hotspot within Victoria, then yes, I'd encourage them to stay at home. But what we need to see, Pete, is we need to see Queensland opened up again. Look, we are safe, like what the Prime Minister has been saying. The reason why we all had to do everything that we did, you know, hold up in our homes, worked from home, we flattened the curve, that's exactly what we did in Queensland. We've done it very successfully. And now it's time, you know, to drag this state out of the COVID recession that we found ourselves in. You know, like the Prime Minister said, get out from under the border. The Premier has an opportunity, get out from under the doona, I should say, or across the border. But the Premier has an excellent opportunity today. The Premier has an opportunity to really help out this state. You know, I was in Early Beach late last week, and there's 25 shops shut on the main street. People up there are screaming out for the borders to be open. I mean, it's paradise up there, but at the moment it's paradise lost. It's really sad. People
do have health concerns, though, of an outbreak, and that's why the borders have remained shut. Do you have concerns of an outbreak if the borders are reopened, if, say, travellers from Victoria are allowed in? Do you have those concerns?
Well, look, of course, we always need to put the health and well-being of Queenslanders first, and that's exactly what I'm doing with this position. I'm very concerned about people's health and livelihoods because the borders remain shut as well. We've really got to look at this from a perspective of what is actually happening. There is one person right now across Australia in ICU. We do need to make sure that we keep social distancing, we wash our hands, and if you're sick, you stay home from work. I mean, all of those practices have been done very well by Queenslanders, and I know that Queenslanders will, stay on board and continue to do that. But when you look at a tourism state like Queensland, it is nonsensical that our borders remain shut in the beautiful winter months that we have up here. We need to get the borders open. We need to get that economic activity, and we need to get people back into jobs, and that should be the Premier's priority. But it just doesn't seem it. I mean, this is a Premier who's been dithering over a decision. In fact, she actually joked about it over the weekend, which was a real slap in the face to anyone that is looking to restart their business or get people back into work.
What about this decision on football teams that come to Queensland, whether it's AFL, whether it's NRL, or any code for that matter? If they play a Melbourne team, then they have to quarantine for 14 days. Is that fair enough, or is that a bit too much?
Well, Well, Pete, in relation to that, what I think we've got to have is we've got to have clear and concise messaging. And, you know, what's good for one's got to be good for the other. And that's exactly so the Chief Health Officer has said that here in Queensland in relation to the AFL teams playing. It seems interesting to me, though, that the Chief Health Officer, whom the Premier said would be making the decision on borders, was able to make this decision yesterday, but we still haven't heard about the borders. So, look, we do need, if anyone is coming, and I'll keep saying it, my position is the border should be open, but if anyone's coming from a hotspot, well, they have to be quarantined. And I think that's very important, and that's one way that we can, you know, fire this economy up again.
How do you police that, though?
Well, and that's what the government's resources are there to do. I mean, instead of having people sitting on the borders, I mean, the Premier can certainly look at her government resources towards that. I mean, we've now seen the federal government put resources into Victoria to try to assist Victoria. We've got to go back to what is actually happening in Queensland, Pete. This is a state that is safe. It is safe to travel here. And we have got the ability to control any outbreaks. And we saw that with the backpacker that, I think it was a backpacker that came from down south into Bundaberg, was a strawberry picker. You know, I've been in Bundaberg. No one else has caught the virus. It's been controlled. And the reason why it's been controlled is because we're now prepared for any outbreaks. And that's how we've got to look at this. If there are isolated outbreaks, we can control it. I mean, Queenslanders have done the right thing.
There is a report in the Courier Mail today that there may well be a trade-off today, Deb, that stage 3 restrictions may well be brought forward from July 10, so they would come into place a little bit earlier, giving more freedom to people and to businesses as well, being allowed to have more people in restaurants or cafes or cinemas or what have you. Yep. Is that something that you would support?
Well, look, I would, Pete, and I'm looking forward to seeing those easing of restrictions that hopefully the Premier will announce today. I have been calling for more common sense rules, more easing of restrictions within and to have them brought forward from the Premier's roadmap, because we know other states have it's much easier. More people can go to restaurants, for example. The feedback I'm getting here in Queensland, particularly from restaurant owners, particularly from people that are trying to organise even small events, is the rules just don't seem to make sense. And we do need clear, concise messaging, and instead what we're getting from the Premier is chaos and confusion. So let's hope we get a bit of common sense today, because I can tell you the businesses are hurting, people are hurting, they want their jobs back, and they really do want to drag Queensland out of this COVID recession.